You mentioned earlier that you voted against the Iraq War. You often point that out. You want troops out of Afghanistan. In general, you take a very cautious approach as far as committing troops.
Yes.
Could you outline in more detail, other than an outright attack on the homeland, what criteria would you use in saying, yes, this is worth committing troops?
I'm not a pessimist, but I think our history is that it just, and I say this as a United States Senator, somebody who's in the Congress, it's very easy for a politician to give a really tough speech. And the only thing that X country respects is force. How often have we heard that in our lifetimes? And therefore, we're going to go to war. You know? Take a look at what happened in Vietnam. And I was a young man marching in the streets against the war in Vietnam. History indicated that those who advocated that war were terribly, terribly wrong. And a whole generation, my generation, the young men who came home for that war, you know, so many died in Vietnam, somebody came home and died here, some of them are on the streets today. War is a terrible, terrible thing. And I know that from a political point of view, it looks wimpy to be in favor of diplomacy. Hey, get tough with that country. But often the politicians who are sending our young working class kids into war, it's not their kids who are going to war. Donald Trump didn't go to war. So I think that force is the last response. Sometimes it may be necessary. If you're in a genocidal situation, you know, where millions of people, or large numbers of people might be killed without international response. And by the way, I think it should not be just the United States responding. I believe in strengthening the United Nations, not weakening it. You know, so I would like to see, when necessary, when force is applicable, to see countries around the world coming together on that response. But you know, if I think back on my own lifetime, your lifetime, I think about Vietnam, I think about the war in Iraq. Those were terrible, terrible mistakes. And it wasn't the politicians who paid the price. It was working class kids and people all over the world who were impacted by those wars. God knows how many hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people died as a result of the Iraq war. So we have got to be very, very cautious. Trump is cutting back on aid to the, cutting back on aid to the State Department. We have, maybe you could do a better job. Commercial break. Be back in a minute.
Technical difficulties.
All right.
So got a limited runway.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere. All right. So Trump is cutting back on support for the State Department, our own state. I've been all over the world, you know, as a congressman and senator. Made many trips with Tom Harkin, by the way. And you're impressed by the quality of people who you see in embassies all over the world. Serious people who know the language, who know the culture, who are representing the United States in very positive ways. To cut back on those people while we greatly, greatly expand military spending to lay the groundwork for war, no, that's very much the opposite of what I believe. So you cannot predict what happens tomorrow or 10 years from now. But I believe in diplomacy. I'll tell you what else I believe in. I believe in exchange programs. I believe that wars often evolve when people are frightened about somebody else because they don't know anything about them. It's very easy to demonize somebody else. Different person of different language, different color, different culture. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, I started two sister city programs, one in the former Soviet Union and one in Nicaragua. And I think both of them are still around today. It was beautiful to see kids. I'll never forget seeing kids from what was then the Soviet Union coming here, you know, talking, be involved with kids from Burlington, Vermont. We need to make the world a little bit smaller place and make sure that we know each other before we go around killing each other.